In this program, we shall be looking at why scholars of Usulul Fiqh and Maqasid felt it necessary that in the attempt to increase the certainty with which they represented the Prophet, peace be upon him, in giving or issuing rulings, that they factored in the context of the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. They were interested in distinguishing between that part of the tradition or Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, which was of universal and eternal relevance for humanity, and which one was Seerah. What was part of biography of only historical relevance, and that while we could learn some lessons from the Seerah in looking at how things were done, they wanted to distinguish between what was required of a Muslim to implement and emulate from the Prophet, peace be upon him, and which was not. When it comes to the meaning of the term Sunnah, scholars in different fields have defined and continue to use the term Sunnah to mean different things. Literally, Sunnah just means the tradition, the way of doing things. So we hear things like Sunnatullah, the Sunnah of Allah, Sunnah to Rasul, Sunnah to Sahaba, the Sunnah of the Prophet, the Sunnah or way of doing things or laws of the Prophet, laws of Allah, or the tradition of the Sahaba. Some scholars, particularly in the sciences of Hadith, when they talk about Kitab wa Sunnah, meaning Kitab, the book, and the Sunnah, Sunnah here usually means Hadith collections. So when they say it is not in the Kitab, it is not in the book, but it is in the Sunnah, Sunnah here means Hadith. For scholars in fiqh, when it comes to acts of worship, they would describe a particular type of fasting as being a Sunnah fasting, or a prayer as being Sunnah, as opposed to it being fard, compulsory. Sunnah here means mustahab or mandub. It means something is encouraged, but not obligatory or fard. For scholars of usul, Sunnah has a much broader but also specific meaning, and it refers to that part of the Prophet, peace be upon him, which was applying the message of the Quran in his own context. And the Sunnah would refer to those things the Prophet said or did or approved of, and how he did his things, which was to be emulated, how he implemented the Quran in his context. So, in the Sunnah, therefore, of the Prophet, peace be upon him, certain things that the Prophet said or did or approved of, and when we look at what he approved of, it means things done by others which he approved of. Whether they were done for cultural reasons, whether they were done by Sahaba, or whether they had just been part of the culture of that society that we today call Sunnah. So when we talk about Sunnah, of what the Prophet said or did or approved of that others did, or others said, but which he approved of either because he was silent over them or because he commended. Within the Sunnah, therefore, we find certain things as being obligatory, others as being recommended, others merely permissible, neither encouraged nor discouraged, others discouraged or even prohibited. And so in the Sunnah, we find that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was married to up to 9 wives at a time. That is prohibited for Muslims to emulate. We will find other things as we go on that were either encouraged or even discouraged, or which were specific to certain contexts. So in the search for certainty regarding the will of God and the intents of the Prophet when he would say, do, or approve of something, scholars wanted to be certain that they were not misrepresenting the Prophet in their time and places. In an effort to be certain regarding whether they were implementing or emulating the Sunnah that was universal for their own time and place or for any time and place, scholars try to look at the context of Hadith, see how the Prophet intended it, see how the Sahaba understood it, see how it goes with the objectives of the Quran and other authentic Sunnah. And the scholars then try to distinguish between what was tashri', what was legally binding, and what was ghayra tashri', what was not of legislative implication. So tashri' really referred to those things that were binding on the community, either encouraged or compulsory. Ghayra tashri' referred to those that were of no legislative implication. We didn't have to follow them. They belonged to a context. And this was important for scholars when they tried to represent the Prophet in new contexts, to ensure that the implication and meanings that they derived from the Quran and from the Sunnah in particular were meant as they understood them in their own particular contexts. So the distinction between what was historical or seerah and what was Sunnah, meaning the eternally relevant understanding of the Quran and its application in human society, by looking at the context in which it was done, how it was understood, it added to the scholar's certainty regarding whether a particular practice of the Sunnah, a particular statement, was to be emulated or whether it was not of legislative implication and people could do what they felt fit in those circumstances.